Any other motions forthcoming?
Yes, Mayor. After the last meeting, I had asked the legal department to provide me with some information that was relative to the legal case that we were informed that we had won in the last meeting. After review of that, I have drafted something that I'm going to bring to council today and make a motion. The motion is for censure per charter, section 4.13 of Councilor Hanneken. That is for overstepping bounds as a member of Macedonia Council with the finance director. Behavior unbecoming of a member of council with the facility next door with the dementia patients, and taking a position contrary to the oath of office. That's relative to the case that I had discussed earlier. I have a statement that I'm going to pass to council, and I'll offer the same to the media, and I'd like to offer that to council this time.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Are there any comments?
Yeah, I think that in the work session, we asked you what the motions were, and you never even indicated what this is. And in the past, we've always had somewhat of an understanding that motions were going to be discussed, at least briefly before. I don't think it's fair for Mrs. Hanneken to be ambushed by this. It appears to me to be, and so I'm very much concerned about your behavior.
You make a great point, Mr. Enderby. You recall that you were also part of a censure of Mr. Miller years back, that was not discussed in the work session. It was taken to the floor, and you did in fact vote yes on it.
I don't remember that, but I also know I voted in the past for censuring Mrs. Spraggins, and I've regretted at least that one. And I'm not sure. I don't remember Mr. Miller's censure, and I don't think it's fair what you're doing. And if I didn't object then, I was not as wise as I am now. And I think your behavior is rude.
I think that this year, with the new council and the elections that we have established a decorum with this council, and that's something we would like to maintain.
Well, this is the type of...
Mr. Randall, please let me finish. I'm speaking.
Fine.
We want to establish something here that we're going to work together. We're not going to work against each other. It's very difficult for me to look at all of us up here when someone says, we just won one of the biggest court cases this city has ever seen. And then the next statement said, well, we should have settled it for 50 grand. If you're right, you're right. I think there's apologies deserved across the board to many different entities. There was many accusations that were made, and we won the case, but it was turned into something negative. We can go into the finance director who helped develop a budget that said we had $2.5 million, folks. That influenced every vote up here. When the new lady came in, she says we have 1.2. I'm a little concerned about someone working with the finance director sitting at home who's not supposed to touch our budget, but affected us that greatly that we have 1.2 when I was told we had 2.5. Every vote I made was based on $2.5 million. That is a great and profound impact on what we do every day.
May I?
Go ahead.
I understand that we're trying to move forward and we're trying to be more cordial, but at the same time, this type of activity, this ambush type of activity, does not encourage confidence. It encourages divisiveness, and that is my concern. I'm an attorney. 100% of my work is in litigation. And yes, it's always great to celebrate a victory, but it's not a ball game, Mr. Molnar. Just because you win a case doesn't mean you won economically. And we don't need to have pep rallies, and if one of the council members disagrees and suggests that maybe we won the war, but we paid a horrible economic price for it, there's a certain amount of credence with that. When I work for a corporation now, and I've worked for a corporation for approximately 7 years, it's an insurance company, American Family. So I don't have to worry anymore about the cost of attorney's fees because I'm paid a salary. But when I was in private practice, I would always talk to clients and make sure they understood. It's just not always about winning. There's economic costs with it. And so it's not, I think that's all Ms. Hanneken was addressing last meeting. And that's the point I want to make. And I just, again, This is not the way to encourage confidence and a work together attitude. So I am distressed.
You make great points, but I want to remind you of one thing too, that council governs itself. And when there's a misconduct that's committed by the council, it's our job to address that. The one glaring one outside of the one you're referring to would be the situation with next door with the dementia and Alzheimer's patients, which is still ongoing to this day. And I'm deeply troubled that we're going to fight a place where, unfortunately, Mrs. Hanneken was found where she wasn't supposed to be, and they called our police. That's part of what my report shows here. And to this day, we're still fighting that battle because they said, you don't belong in here, get out of here. And now she is trying to get that woman's job. She's calling the board of the business and saying that, you know, she made a fatal mistake to tell you to get out of a ward you don't belong in. That's not conduct that I think Macedonia Council should foster. I think it's something that we need to say, you know what, enough's enough. I'm going to reference the gentleman that's here today. One of the things he said at the beginning was problems do not need to be permanent. This is one way for us to say this problem doesn't need to be permanent. Maybe this is the one time for us to say enough's enough, let's move on from it, let's all be adults. That's what I'm after.
Well, ambush is ambush.
All right, you've heard the readings, or any other comments?
I'm going to make a comment here. This is the kind of thing that has been typical of Mr. Molnar. And there are things in here where he's attacking me like he just did about an incident at Summit Point. I have not spoken to anybody from Summit Point for months. And the statements that were made were false about me, and I think everyone knows that. But what I'm saying is this. The kinds of things that you're citing here, they go back to try to relitigate issues that we had disagreements about. And there is nothing in here that I've ever done to violate my oath of office. And the idea that you should show up with this kind of set of accusations with no preparation, no opportunity for me to do anything other than sit here and listen to this calumny against my name. And you can see that it was put together not tonight, that's for sure. I think that what we're doing here is that we're having trouble with understanding that disagreement is legitimate. And as was the case when I commented about this lawsuit, I said, and I don't see anything that is disrespectful about it, that it cost a lot of money and that we could have settled it for much less money, and I believe that's what we should have done. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. And I believe that's a legitimate point. I also believe it's a legitimate point to have disagreements on how we're going to approach the budget. And I think it's, I am not undermining anyone. In fact, when I have posted something, and this has been mentioned on the Next Civic website, we're talking about legislation that has been presented to council by the administration. That's simply what we're doing. And if that is in fact something that we cannot do, I think we're in trouble. And I will say this, there have been no discussions. Mr. Molnar has chosen to eliminate discussions totally, because now we have this 15-minute session where we just kind of shuffle through who's going to present something. So these decisions to try to blacken my name and to be very upset about disagreements, I do not believe are reflective of the way that our democracy should operate or any other legitimate business of this council should operate. I object to this presentation like this. As I say, there are a lot of statements in here that I would have to go look at to rebut, but to ask people to vote on this kind of thing, I think is an example of why we're having trouble. I think it is. And I don't believe any of us in the public needs to know that if we can't have disagreements on council, we've changed from a democracy to a dictatorship. And I think we don't want to do that. So I think just basically, this thing should never have been presented. But I do not have the majority, so we are going to just sit here and hear what's said.